Good evening, everyone. Now, this is the fifth, our 100th anniversary lecture series. Today, we have a speaker from our Zenshuji. And the title is Mottainai, Zen Approach to Sustainability, How the Zen and Food Waste Come Together. Could you introduce our speakers?
Hello, welcome back to the May version of our 100th anniversary lecture series. I'm Lon Kurshige, and I just have to tell a little story about our speaker, about how we came to the speaker today, Amy Honjiyo. John and Kojima Sensei might remember this. This is over a year ago when we were first coming up with the idea for the lecture series. We were sitting in the coffee shop, and we thought, okay, we want to have priests and monks to talk about the Dharma and practice. And so we've had a number of priests and monks, and we'll continue to have a number of priests and monks on our speakers list. And then we wanted scholars to sort of talk about, Buddhism and their specialty, especially those who know a lot about Zenshuji, like we had Duncan Williams. And the third important speakers that we wanted to get were people who were Zenshuji members, who knew Zenshuji intimately, and could talk about their lives as lay people and how Buddhism relates to their hobbies, their careers, their passions, etc. And so the first person we thought about, we thought, well, who can do that? We all just unanimously thought, well, we'll start with Amy. So you were inevitable in many ways, Amy, from the start to be speaking tonight. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to another person to introduce Amy, John Flores. And he has a particular reason why Amy has asked for him to introduce her as well.
Excuse me, your camera is off. The camera we can't see. We just see Kojima Sensei's portrait. We don't see anyone's face.
Oh, really?
Yes. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
Great. Hello, welcome back. My name is John Flores. I wanted to just talk a little bit about how I met Amy back in Daigaku Rumei's History of Buddhism class here at Zenshuji. And since then, that was a number of years ago, and since then we've been involved with Zazenkai, women's group, Tuesday volunteers, and sitting on the board of directors for Zenshuji. It's been a real pleasure to do that and interact with Amy in that capacity. But she's involved in so many different facets of temple life that she's a really fascinating person to talk to. And without further ado, Amy Hon.
So thank you all for coming. And thank you all of the Zoom guests here as well. I have to admit, I'm glad that Lon kind of gave a little background of why I was picked. I was a little worried that why I was selected as part of Zenshuji's 100th anniversary and what I could share for the 100th anniversary of Soto Zen Buddhism of North America. But now in looking at all of my photos and seeing what my interests in sustainable projects are and of my love of Zazen and doing sitting, that I realized how much more that they began to overlap and actually complement each other. So from that standpoint, that's what I want to share today is my how the two came together. And as a relatively new member, I've only been here for 7 years, that I would like all of you and all of you on Zoom at the end, when we're done, if you have stories to share that also relate to this topic, we can talk about them as well. So I'm only talking from my experience of the 7 years, but I've had a good time. So first I want to start with, maybe most of you here would know, I am Sansei American, which means I'm third generation Japan and ancestry that is here in the United States or anywhere outside of Japan. And what that means, and it really became clear to me being here at Zenshuji, that it means I'm a cultural mix between Japan or Japanese and American. And I have to admit, I look Japanese, but I think I'm a lot more American. Probably Kojima Sensei would agree with that. To start with, let's look a little bit. I'd like to start with my background a little bit on the first slide. We're going to come to the first slide, which is mine. Well, we don't need it. Is my parents.
Let me
And-
see. Could you give me a little more time?
Okay, well, I'm going to just start talking about them and I'm sure they'll come into view. So my mother's name was Chizuko, although I don't think anyone knew her name because the story was told that when she was very young, a delivery man came to the house and said, you should have an American name. And everyone knows her as Dorothy. So on the next page. So this is not Chizuko. No one called her that. And on her gravestone said Dorothy. So she became Dorothy. Her father had a very successful Miso yacht in Los Angeles. And my mother, at 14 years old, became the delivery person for a lot of the orders in Los Angeles and up into the San Joaquin Valley. So at 14, she was driving all through the streets of Los Angeles. And her parents were members of a church here, a temple in Little Tokyo, Hikashi Honganji. And my father, who was born in Guadalupe, his mother was a charter member of a Christian church in Santa Maria, the Union Church of Santa Maria. He is one of 12 children. 6 were born in Japan and who I never met and who just remained in Japan. And the other 6 were born here in the United States. Of the 6, 2, which were the eldest daughters, were shared and lived in other families that did not have children. So basically it wasn't until an adult that really all this came together, that there were 12 children in this family and 6, and then 1 that came from Japan that lived here in the United States. So they told me it was more typical at that time to have happened. But anyway, sometimes our family reunions include the extended family. And so we have very big family reunions of all these other families that come together. So that's my father and my mother. Okay, so they were born and then here in Los Angeles. And the next slide shows that they were married in Los Angeles, but lived in Santa Maria. And this is the church that my grandmother was a charter member of. But here, as you can see, the military are here because a month after they were married, they were all put into buses and then went to a incarceration camp in Gila, Arizona. So my oldest sister was born in Gila. And then because my father went to a training school, my mother was able to choose and was sent then to Heart Mountain, Wyoming, to be in the incarceration camp where her mother and sister lived. So then my second oldest sister was married in Heart Mountain, not married, but was born in Heart Mountain, Wyoming. And then finally, after the war, 3.5 years later, we came back to Los Angeles. And eventually my father was able to open a watch repair and jewelry store. This is located right here on San Pedro Street between 1st and 2nd. It's no longer there, but that's where he had his business in Los Angeles, here. Okay, the next slide. And then, of course, then they had my third sister and then myself. So here I am, you can see, I think I look very Western, very American here with my stuffed toys. And my parents, in some ways, were conscious about not broadcasting their Japanese. So my household, there was no Japanese speaking, even though they were bilingual. So the only time they spoke Japanese is when they didn't want us to hear what they were saying. But all the rest of the time, it was all English. I see heads nodding here, maybe agreement as well. Although they did not speak Japanese, they wanted us to be Japanese environment. So I went to Evergreen Baptist Church, which was all Japanese, 99.5% Japanese. So we all went to Evergreen Baptist Church. And I was allowed to go to an all Japanese Girl Scout troop, which was located also in Little Tokyo at Union Church. So it was kind of a balance between these two. My mother did not cook Japanese food. She knew all the new Betty Crocker recipes. She had the Betty Crocker spine that you could add the leaflets to, and she did all the recipes that were in that book. Except every meal for dinner, we had gohan, we always had rice. So it was kind of a blend between the two. And the only time we didn't have rice is when we had spaghetti. But other than that, we always had rice. And for some reason, I did not like rice. So the only time I really looked forward to eating rice was Thanksgiving, because my mother makes gravy. So I could put gravy on my rice. So that's my childhood about gohan and gravy. So that's kind of was my childhood here. But like I said, I was very Western influenced by this. And on the next slide, here is my husband. And this was our 25th wedding anniversary. And we got married here on First Street at the Far East Cafe. So for those that you know it was kind of a Japanese hangout. And typically you would go there after you were married or after a funeral and have a meal. But in this case, we decided to get married there. So we were married at the Far East Cafe. So for the most part, I would say that I had the veneer of being conventional and a practical individual, kind of defined, but quantitatively defined by numbers and by words. But really, I have to admit that most of my life, I think I was motivated by curiosity. That if I was curious about it, then I was going to go and investigate and look at it. So that is really what motivated me. And a lot of other conventional values and views, I think I was undisturbed by them. I don't think it really pertained to me. So that was kind of the mix that I started with before I came to neighbors in longtime friends of mine, Patty and Steve Nagano, moved to Little Tokyo, and they were wanting to become acquainted. And so they saw this introduction to Zen meditation at Zenshuji. And they said, oh, do you want to go with us? I said, okay, sure, I will go with you. I think I was the most impressed of all the people that I went with about what was happening there. But there were three things that I remember about this class. Number one was that Daigaku, who ran the class, his mentor said, Zazen warms the cushion. And for some reason, just that phrase was complete enough for me in its simplicity. And I said, I get it. I like this, I can do this. So I really like this word, warms the cushion. And number two, he brought up this concept of mu, which I couldn't really get my head around at all. And what it really began to point out to me is how much anyone's language and the words that are in the language make this construct of how you view and what you define as your world. And if there's not a word for it, then it's not in your mindset because there's not a word for it. So I really like this whole new take about what mu is or is not. And I think I ended the class by thinking that I'm not going to put mu in a dictionary because it doesn't fit in any language dictionary. I'm just going to set mu apart. So the whole idea that I could do this with an idea or a concept or beyond the concept, I was very much intrigued by. And the last thing that I was really impressed with was Daigaku, who's not here today. But Daigaku spoke with a lot of pauses. Peter and John, I don't know if you remember him. There were, and I think they were intentional, but what it did for me is it expanded my understanding of a language, because not only were you looking at the words and the sounds coming out, you began to look at the spaces in between the words and the meaning of what the pauses meant. And to me, on a personal level, that was very informative, because being in a Western corporate environment, the one who said it first, the one who was on top of it, they were the winners. And I could never keep up. And I had to do other ways to strategically be involved in those kind of conversations. And it was so reinforcing for me to hear someone speak this way, and because it was so relevant to really what the Zen Buddhism is, it's so much more than what you think or what you think the words are. It's really a lot to do with the pauses in between. So I really thank you, Daigaku, for those lessons from the introduction to the Zen class. So I appreciated that very much. And here in close to it, it was a very good group that we had. And this picture down here is a follow-up. This used to be our Sunday Zazen group here. And they were all people that I had met during that introduction to Zazen class. So Kojima Sensei, maybe in the future we can start our Sunday Zazen again. But I was very happy to meet these people here, and very active, maybe not always present, but this was a very good starting for a lot of us. Thanks a lot for being in our class. Yeah. Okay, so at this time when I started to become involved at Zenshuji, there was a story to be told about my interest in sustainability. And it has to do with the sakura trees at the Little Tokyo metro station. Now, at this time, the metro station was coming in, and Metro decided that they would plant sakura trees at this metro station, which was kind of a relevant idea to have. So they planted these trees here, but as soon as the station opened, they were outside of the zone of watering. So these trees were very thirsty and were like failing quickly because of this. So this is a person who maybe some of you know is Thomas
Okay.
O'Kelly. Yes, thank you. And he started this Sakura Rescue Project group, and people from the community came, and he approached Koya-san if he could get the water, and he would get 5-gallon buckets and fill it with water and schlep it a block away to water all these sakura trees that were dying. And finally, LA Metro realized what had happened, and they turned the water back on. So then all these trees here then were saved, and here they are thriving. And at the dedication of the station, here's Thomas. And here's another gentleman here who is from the Japan America Society of Southern California. And he was sponsoring students from Fukushima as an exchange or an opportunity to learn and to leave Fukushima. And they had heard about these trees that Thomas and everyone had saved, and they wanted to come and dedicate a tree to their hardworking founder of their orphanage in Fukushima. So here is a sign that says Spirit of Iwako, which is the founder. And so they had this dedication. So it was a very nice story about our LA Little Tokyo Art District station. But then they decided to expand the station and move it across the corner to make it another big central hub. So at that time, of course, the trees were in the way. So they took the trees out, and then they didn't know what to do with them, and nobody wanted them, and they were going to discard them. And as Kojima said to me today, he had some friends who maybe asked if we would take the trees. And so all of the LA Metro trees were boxed and were in our parking lot here. Like maybe some of you remember the time that they were here. And no one else seemed to want them, but we couldn't part with them. And so I think we parted with one. And then all the rest, temple members and Ben and Kunio, dug these holes and planted all these trees all around Zenshuji. So Mottainai and save the trees. So here, if you now walk around the campus here, you'll see these save sakura trees. And from the front, from the street, this is what they'll look like in the springtime here. So it's really a great story about Zenshuji and saving the trees. And here's the last picture about the trees. The orphanage representatives came again and rededicated this tree next to the Kannon statue right on this side is rededicated to the spirit of Iwako. So when you come to the Kannon, you can say hello to the spirit of Iwako. So it's a great story for me to hear about the priorities and actual efforts that were going on here at Zenshuji. So thank you very much for that story. Yeah. And so at the same time, I was volunteering with an organization in Little Tokyo called Sustainable Little Tokyo. And this was their logo here for, maybe most of you here know what this term means, Mottainai. As you recall, Japanese was not spoken at my house, so I had really no experience with this word here. But for those that did, it was kind of the grandmother saying, Mottainai, like don't waste, eat all your food, and don't throw it away and do something with it. So, but I didn't really know this word. And so then I was just beginning to converse with Kojima Sensei. So I asked him, one of my first conversations, I said, so Kojima Sensei, what does Mottainai mean? And Kojima Sensei looks at me and says, why? And I thought, why? And I realized that this is where the American and the Japanese part of me, the concept of Mottainai, like mood, is kind of intrinsic into his everyday being, that I'm asking a very basic question about this. But we started this conversation about Mottainai, and at this time I was traveling to Japan, and so they had children flashcards about Mottainai, and here's the Mottainai boss on, and they had them in English so I could read them. But you know, they're the flashcards about hiragana, but they're from very basic ideas like vegetable peels are tasty. You know, so it was very basic idea about Mottainai. So this is how I began my knowledge of Mottainai. And when I do my Bokashi presentations, I've kind of combined Western and Eastern in that we would say Mottainai are the 3 R's, reduce, reuse, recycle. But really in the Japanese sense, it is so much more comprehensive, and adding a 4th R of respect, and that it is not so much that you have to do these things, but it's really a relationship and how you respect and understand how you're connected to materials as well as to people, as well as to the planet. So in each of these cases, it's a reciprocal respect and understanding of resources and your own energies. So this is the kind of the concept. And so after we had this discussion about Mottainai, I asked Kojima Sensei if he wanted to go on a field trip. So I don't know if you know what this term means here, but this is very popular now. It's called a materials recovery facility, and every large hauler has it. So all these giant trash trucks that you see that are loaded up with trash, you wonder where they're going? They are going to one of these materials recovery facility. So I kind of wanted to make an impression upon Sustainable Little Tokyo, as well as all of us here at the temple, about trash. So this is what happens to the trash that you put out to the curb. Every trash bag is clawed and broken out and is run down conveyor belts, and there's all these people sorting out your trash. all of your trash. So it's larger than a football field, the size of this, and all these conveyor belts. But basically, we're paying them to take our trash, and this business is sorting through and seeing what they can make money off of. Not necessarily always recycle, but what they can make money off of. Metals, at that time it was paper to China, but they're there to make whatever they can, and then the rest, as we all know the story, ends up in the landfill, which of course, now in 2022, landfills are closed. China no longer wants our computer parts. Nobody wants our cardboard, that we're really having to go into another whole level of awareness about responsibility of recycling or less waste. So here we are. I think we're all relieved, and Sunil, if you're still on, even Sunil here is relieved that we're done with our tour. But I think we all really appreciated the impact about waste. So back at Zenshuji, this is the level we were at, trying to get rid of styrofoam cups. And I'm not sure if Paul says he's really very happy, but we're trying to use cups, not styrofoam. But it's a hard challenge, which we all are trying to move ahead on because styrofoam is so cheap. But anyway, this is really where the direction that we are really, the temple and really the world should be moving toward. Okay. But we were gardening, having gardening for the children and food source here. So that way, Zenshuji was really committed to the garden. And the other key thing that I like is that they were already recycling their food waste. Nowhere in Little Tokyo, temples were even considering this idea. But here at Zenshuji, everyday waste, your Sunday waste, all of your obon, all the cooking that we do, all of that ends up outside. So it was really very impressive about recycling here at Zenshuji. So again, I was impressed. So the Sustainable Little Tokyo organization then asked to partner with Zenshuji in a grant that the city was providing, and Zenshuji said, okay. So on the next slide, you see for the city of Los Angeles, their first food waste grant challenge. Sustainable Little Tokyo and Zenshuji were one of 7 recipients to receive the grants, and we became a food waste warrior, just in case you've forgotten what we were. But that was really a good exercise, in which we then worked with 5 different partners in Little Tokyo in educating and starting to recognize and make some decisions about recycling of your food waste. I wanted to have this product, Bokashi, used in our recycling method. I'd heard about it, but didn't know about it. And so we were able to meet and have this man work with us. And he learned about using a Bokashi from the originator of the product in Okinawa, Dr. Higa. So he was one of the first acolytes of Dr. Higa. And he lived here in Orange County, and he was able to teach us about Bokashi. So here we are at Zenshuji making lots of Bokashi. And I have this picture here. This is Mieko, who's also a temple member. And she was the one who was able to make the contact because she was already using the Bokashi with her group. And so knew of this person, Hiro Takeuchi. So here we are, and our grant was very successful. So successful that the 2 preschool classes that we have here wanted to become involved. So here they are having their workshops, making Bokashi. And what I really noticed about this is that most of these families here are from Japan. And again, it's this mindset of they already knowing about what Mottainai means. So that after we were done with this workshop, I received several emails saying, thank you very much for this workshop. I feel less guilty. Because already they were practicing this in Japan and felt like they had kind of gone away coming here because it was not practiced or not an option. So they were thanking me about reintroducing Bokashi. And then here, the preschool down the street, Nishihonganji, also wanted to be participating in here. And so their preschool, of course, regularly now, every year we make Bokashi at Nishihonganji. And this is Johnny's daughter.
Now, what's Bokashi? Is that compost?
Oh, you know, you asked the perfect question, Carrie, and if you wait 1 minute.
Oh, I see. Oh,
Okay, so here we are at Nishihonganji, and then we decided we're gonna ongoing to have these workshops.
okay.
So Zenshuji agreed. So here we are. This is right here in the Nico building. It's packed. I was so happy to find people interested in garbage. It just made my day. But you can see the temple members and everyone that come up to process and recycle all their food waste. And at the same time, we rotated between Zenshuji and we'll get the signal down. The Japanese American Cultural Center. So if you recognize this space here, again, there are temple members here and just other people, once the notice went out, that came to this event. So I was very happy and the people seemed very happy to come. Okay, but as you all know, March 2020, no more workshops. No one came to make Bokashi. So then I went into a cottage industry and all the Bokashi is made in my garage. So this is like what came out of my garage, and the different people were assigned to like have their satellite for distribution. And then a lot of people came to my house, and here's Lon, was our first trial drive-by pickup Bokashi. So we continued on with our efforts here. And here's Eric, who also came, and then a lot of other people and friends who came to pick up their Bokashi at my house because they didn't make it, but they still wanted the product. So do I have 1 minute more? And Lon didn't have any space to bury his food waste after Bokashi. So he'd bring all of his buckets to my house and bury them at my house. And then get more Bokashi. So that was how serious he was about things. Okay, so anyway, this is what was happening during COVID. Okay, and then we also were still distributing out from Zenshuji. So thank you for our other distributors here and here. And anyone who visited, here's our visitor here from Iowa. Yeah. Zuiko Sensei, when she stopped in, then she was aware of the product and wanted it. So here we are selling it. So Carrie, I thought this would be a good time for a quick infomercial. So what is Bokashi? Thank you. Okay, so for those that aren't familiar with it, you can see on the next page that it is a quick method of recycling your food waste. Okay, so if you're familiar with compost method, the traditional, it takes quite a while, 3 to 6 months ago. This one here, within a month, you'll have finished product in the soil. So it's a very quick turnaround time here, and it can handle meat and dairy. Okay, and because it's a fermenting process, not a regular air drying, there's no rotting smells. And if anything, it'll smell a little bit like vinegar or like a pickle, because basically it's like a pickling process. So all the nutritive value in your food waste stays within and then is buried in the ground, where you don't have that luxury in a traditional aerobic kind of compost system. So, and also because it's anaerobic, again, there's no greenhouse gases emitted during the time of this fermenting process. So there are a lot of easy pluses, and I have to say, if I can do it, most people can do it. So it's that easy. So anyway, this is Bokashi Method. And in a nutshell, you have a container, you collect it, you add this Bokashi mixture into it, which is really the active ingredient are special microorganisms that have been inoculated into wheat bran. So that's why all those bags show like wheat bran in here, Carrie. And that's what you would take home and just sprinkle into your food bucket. treat as shaking because it's regular. And then you just close it off. And then after 2 weeks, you'll have starting to see the inoculation and a little bit of the fungi growing on the top of your food waste. And then you just dig a hole and bury the contents. 2 weeks later, you can plant on top of it. And after 2 weeks of that, you won't even know that you planted any food waste there. So here comes my Bokashi contact person. Okay, so if any final questions, if you want to know more, I'm ending my infomercial. We have bi-monthly workshops. Hopefully they'll be in person now, but they have been on Zoom for the last 2 years. And especially for temple members and those today, if you want, I'm sure we can arrange a special Bokashi workshop for you as well. If you want to just buy retail, at the beginning of this year, we are now selling Bokashi and its buckets at the Onzen hardware store here in Little Tokyo. So we are trying to support and sustain Onzen, their 75th anniversary. So please support Onzen hardware as well. Okay, so in addition to recycling of food, then I also appreciated this other process involving these. Ume. So it's a process that we do that we pick from a tree. This is Mrs. Kawada's tree, giant tree. And I guess the technique is you shake the tree, and as some of us know, it's better if you have a helmet on if you're underneath, and then you pick them up from the ground. So it's really kind of a group effort and very fun to do. And here we are here, and it's really an opportunity to mix with community people that like the idea of umeboshi and other temple members here. And it was my opportunity to meet Mrs. Sawada, who was a charming lady with this tree, who was a great host. And I loved her Mottainai fence here that has a little cutout hole so that she could wave to us as we were leaving. So this is a tradition and really a good tradition that Zenshuji does. And we continued it this week. This year, we went to this man's house, Sam Mashita's house, and his tree was a more modest, but still produced a lot of fruit. So there's Kojima Sensei shaking the tree, and us on the bottom collecting down here. And of course, this is only the beginning of the process. It's quite intensive, but very meditative to do. So here we are, plucking out the little stem from every plum so that when you received your umeboshi, there's only the meat, not the stem. So we must have done a lot of that the same day. Okay, and then the process, this is from a prior year. So there's a lot of washing and massaging, alcohol.
With salt.
With salt, yes, with salt for the umeboshi. Okay. And this year, how many pounds did we have? Couple hundred pounds that we were drying right out here in the patio. So they can't touch each other. So they each have to be individually placed, and then they can't stay that way. You have to turn them and not have them touch like this. So Kojima Sensei and I were trying to count how many times each individual plum is touched in the making of umeboshi. And we got up to at least 12. So this is really a very meditative process to do, especially for the volume. But the result is, on the next slide, then that's why you see them as red, because we are soaking here the shiso, the red shiso, and then they are all soaked again in the red shiso, and then put out again to dry and turned. and then put into little containers, and it's really a item that you have to know about because they sell out fast at Obon. But this is one of our maybe money makers, or just really a signature product that Zenshuji offers that is very labor and thought intensive. Oh, but you forgot one point. And this is a reward here for those of us that have been helped for a long time, if you may know what this is. This is a product of Ume shoe. So we were rewarded with that. So, okay. So in addition to that kind of sustainability of tradition, Zenshuji really offers a lot. And here's an example of Nuka Zuke, another type of pickling method, a class that we have here. And again, you think that we're drinking here again, but we're not. This is again used in the process of the pickling or fermenting of these products here. And this one here, I think has been going on for a long time. If you want to make miso, there's a whole miso making process. And of course, this is our Suzuki-san with giving away the secrets about making our obon sushi. So it's really very good. And also the traditional arts. Here is Gowaco. We have Gowaco members here today. And a lot of members here at Zenshuji are from the Tottori prefecture. And this is really what, for their dancing, is what they're known for. And so before Obon, they would be practicing here in our lobby, the Obon practice here. And here's another sustainable practice. All of your old cloths, you sew them back together and you make cleaning cloth, Zokin. And I have to point out Lon here again, because Zenshuji offers many different experiences. And this is where Lon learned about threading a needle and hand sewing. And this is the expert of his first Zokin. This is my favorite sustainable act that I learned early on here at Zenshuji. And this is used in regard to the monk's breakfast. These are the bowls that you would be served in, but in terms of a water saving, at the end of the meal, this tool here, the Setsu, is used to clean any remain out of food remnants. And then hot water is poured here, stirred and cleared. That water is then transferred to here, cleaned, and then transferred to clean the last bowl here. And then one of the senseis come by, and all the water then is put into a central container and given to the hungry ghosts in the garden. So none of the water is wasted at all. It's used again and again and again. So if any of you, when we do have breakfast again, should come and experience that, because it's very Mottainai as well as tasty. So this is a story that I learned at the same time. And this concept, wash your bowl, to me is the same as when I learned the zazen about warms the cushion. I think in its simplicity is enough. It describes enough about what it is that you're doing and how much it represents. And this is a story that was told by Joshu the monk, Joshu. And at the end, he's just saying, what do you do next? And wash your bowl. Wash your bowl. And here, this is a sesshin that we have, where many of these practices are put into play. And we have representatives here from Cuba. And so Kojima Sensei is really sharing a lot about cooking, even hashi using here. And as well as that there were representatives, we have John Nomura here today from Seattle. So, and his friend then brought his other friends, and they were all gardeners. And so it was an opportunity then to also share about our gardening and about our food waste recycling. So it was sesshin is also a very nice event. Okay, and just in closing, I want to share, because we all share this planet Earth, we have to learn to live in harmony and peace with each other and with nature. This is not a dream, but a necessity. And this is really where we're at every day, but really even more so now. And I really appreciated the openness of Zenshuji to allow for recognizing the bigger community besides the community that came into the temple. And so, the next slide. Here we are scouting out an event that we hosted called Cross the Bridge. And what it involved is knowing our neighbors across the bridge. So here we are with our little test signs and just seeing what it is to cross the bridge. We knew where we were going. It's to an art school or art community school called Self-Help Graphics. And it was just at the other end of the bridge in East LA. So here we are across the bridge, and here's Joel. And we are beginning to plan out how this event is going to be and what exchange of information we can have about learning about our neighbors. So it meant learning about the history of this building, which this is what it looks like in front. And as Kojima Sensei would say, when you look at an object, where did it come from? And where did it come from? And where did it come from? This building here has a remnant of where it had come from, which even if you go by today on First Street, it's called Ocean Queen. And because before it became this graphics center, it was owned by a Japanese company that was a seafood packing business between Santa Barbara and shipping back to Japan. So when you go into this, you'll still see the warehouse freezer doors, but they carry this as the history of that building. So this was the kind of information that we shared on the Cross the Bridge event. And further across the bridge, here we are crossing, we learned about the history about our concrete river, which we could do better about. But as you cross the bridge, here is a high school here that's called Gonzalo and Felicitas Mendez High School. And they were named for this high school because they were a Mexican family who filed a suit to desegregate public schools in Orange County. And that's where they live. And the opportunity that they were able to live in Orange County is because they were renting a farm from a Japanese family, the Minomitsu family, who were incarcerated in Arizona and could not occupy it at the time. So they were able to make this arrangement for them to occupy and farm and live in this area and eventually to be able to attend public school. So it's a really great story. And this is the high school that's just on the other side of the bridge. So then we come across the bridge, and then Kojima Sensei shared Zenshuji, and they recently had come back from Cuba. And so he's sharing his slides from Cuba. And then we closed because all this event was a precursor to an event called Fandango Obon, which looked at Fandango dancing and Obon dancing. So we have Nobuko Miyamoto here, and she is doing a choreography and dance, which we can do at our Obons called I Dream of Gardens. So that was kind of the culmination of our Cross That Bridge event that's went from Zenshuji to Self-Help Graphics. And this was a byproduct of it, also very sustainable, that we learned at the Self-Help Graphics to make an oya. An oya is basically an unglazed pot that you bury into the ground, fill it with water, and as the soil around became dry, then it would absorb out the liquid to water around. If the ground around was moist, then the water stayed in the glazed pot. So that was what we were learning. I have to admit, ours looked about this size on our first pottery attempt, but this was our goal, was to have a bigger one for the ground. So, and then the last really community event that we had was called Takachizu, which was treasure map. This is kind of the Western, I don't think this is a Japanese word, but we put the two words together, taka and chizu, to make up this concept here. and to identify the treasures of talents and people in Little Tokyo. And so Zenshuji hosted the gardeners. So those that had any special type of gardening or things that they grew or techniques that they had to share. So we had different people come and people from different communities to come to share their gardening techniques. Even we had the Japanese American Gardeners Association represented. So it was quite a mix of people who came to share their talents. And here is from Carolyn here, whose husband has a great green thumb. So here's all that she had to present at the event. And I learned about this here, which maybe some of you know. It kind of looks like ginger, but it's myoga. So I think Ben isn't here, but we tried to grow myoga here. It was a little trickier to do, but this woman here is a great myoga grower. So she brought all of her myoga as well as Goya. So on this next slide, you can see that as a community event, there's Ben, that we were able to share all of our what we grew and how we grew in the community. Okay, and we are at a point of still COVID. So on the next slide here, we still are continuing with our efforts with masks on. And this is another community event that even though it's located here on San Pedro Street, with the help of, oh, he had to leave. This man was here. We tacked on this sign here to really still stress the importance of the connection or the cyclic about recycling. And here's Nancy. We have drive-by pickup of your garbage. And we're still doing finished compost there too. And still a lot of people just happy with their garbage. So it's really a joy to see that. And then I want to close with here at Zenshuji, that we started this program here called Zenaerobics, which really is a great combination of Zen and exercise for people to come to. And this is how we started out with no masks. Zazen, as well as a lot of core strengthening exercises. It was meant to be for seniors, but we like to call it family because it really, for the intergenerational, was really a great opportunity here that's occurring at Zenshuji. However, during during COVID, we went totally to Zoom. And thanks to a Cato grant, we were able to have our senseis on Zoom and presenting with everyone. As you recognize, these are little Zoom squares. And then on the next one, but we always include birthdays and whatever personal joys that you have as part of this program. So it's really more of a community of exercise and Zazen. So we really have a lot of fun. So here's our Zoom Zazen. And this is the point where we're at now, hopefully with progress that we will move toward those that can't come to the temple to have Zoom, and those that can come to the temple will be live. So it's Zoom plus and all still trying to be connected here at Zenshuji. So thank you very much. Everything's connected. Harry.
Yeah, I have a quick question.
1 second, Carrie. Just for those of you on Zoom, write your question in the chat or somehow contact us and to ask your question. If you want to text me, if you like, Sneel's been texting me. So, but the chat is probably the easiest because we can't really see you online so easily. So unless you want to unmute yourself, that's another option and just talk when it's appropriate. So go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, do you have to chop up all the vegetables and stuff when you stick it in the Bokashi mixture? Or do you just big hunks and or how does that work?
Well, the smaller pieces that you have, the more surface that the bokashi or microorganisms can go around to. But you know, some people kind of get carried away and want to stick it into a Cuisinart. You don't have to do that. No Cuisinart necessary. But if you have a pineapple peel strip, I would definitely cut that into smaller bits because that's kind of a gnarly thing to try to put in there. But
And then you sprinkle some kind of fermenting agent.
yes, what we call the bokashi or this mixture.
It's kind of like making miso or
It's kind of like.
skimono. Or-
Yeah, it's, yes, kind of like that, like Nuka Zuke, because you're
Oh, okay,
pickling, because you're
okay.
gonna pickle.
It's kind of like skimono.
It's a skimono that you're gonna put in the ground
Yeah.
not to eat.
Okay.
That's exactly it. So,
Questions for Amy?
I have a Bokashi question.
oh, goodness.
Is that okay?
Okay,
Can you Bokashi your flower bouquets that are failing?
is the camera on Frida?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so it's okay.
Hi. Yes, yes. Yes, you can Bokashi your flower as well.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can I-
Okay.
We just move around.
Anyone else have any questions or anything else that you'd like to, I have to stay over here. Anything else that you can share in terms of your experiences of sustainability or Mottainai? As it relates to your observations about being here at Zenshuji?
I really like your definition of Mottainai, reduce, reuse. instead of on the stuff. Yeah.
Amy, I'm wondering if you can maybe fill in some gaps in your stories, like how did you get into sustainability? Because you kind of there was this picture where you look like one of the extra Supremes.
Yeah, but right now.
And, but then there's nothing about between that and when you came to Zenshuji some years ago. And, so
That's a big.
maybe
gap.
not everything, but what are the through lines that connect you to what happens when you become Ms. Bokashi?
Could you guys come closer the word clearly they want to hear it.
Oh, they were.
Okay.
Okay.
Did they not hear that question?
No.
Actually,
So
we
the
could hear it.
question-
We could hear it. I could hear it.
You could hear it.
Yeah, we could hear it. You could hear it fine.
Go ahead. Anna.
Oftentimes I don't know where my emphasis has come from. Is it from my mother? Is it from my childhood? Is it because I'm Japanese sometimes? Or because I'm more westernized? I would say that probably a significant factor is being influenced by the 60s. So, there already we were Gibbons, we were back to the earth and we were back to the simplicity of it, not so commercial and not so much into waste and greed and none of the, which came later, but none of the supersize me mentality. So, but I think a lot of my family was not one of greed or prestige or wanting to one up in terms of possessions. So already it was into simplicity and to have what you need, period. So I think maybe that was the foundation that agreed a lot with being here and with sustainability. And anybody who reads about the heaps that are happening in the landfill will have to be on board that it's not the way to go. So enough said. Yeah.
Amy, I think Judy will have a question.
Oh, I actually was just gonna make a comment. I think Lon asked if, sorry, I think he said, oh no, you asked about your own personal feeling with like Mottainai, I guess, or like conserving and things like that. And I think I mentioned before, my mother was very much also in terms of like not wasting. But the idea also, if you think about it, is a certain efficiency. It's kind of like poetry, right? It's not really poetry if you put a lot of too many words. And I think if there's too much, I think you're not really getting the essence of life if you're careless. Is like I think Mottainai connects to like being if you're careful as opposed to being careless in terms of your thinking and the way you do things. So that's how I always kind of felt it. And you know, growing up, I was like, well, I didn't really, because growing up in the U.S., you always feel like, oh, this, you know, because there's kind of an excess was considered good, and I'm not, and it's not a judgment, but but then I understood later. It took me some time to say, you know, well, I got to understand, yeah, this is more a beautiful way to, I think, to live, and you care about the earth. That's all. Thank you.
Wash the balls.
Maybe it's just a couple, it's.
Oh, I like it. I like it.
Yeah. No, just a quick comment on the question. I was wondering, because you said you went and you visited the recycling center, which primarily took what they could sell, and they really didn't do much of a recycling portion of it, but was more of a business thing. I was wondering, you know, if then from there it goes to another location or something where actually the things are separated for recycling, things that can be recycled are separated out in a better form.
Oh.
But also in Santa Monica, I think a couple of months ago, maybe longer than that, maybe about 6 months ago, I think first of the year, they gave us separate bins, green bins for food only, but Lon, he wasn't where we were looking at it, but they don't put Bokashi, so it doesn't. I don't know what they do with the waste, but now they have separate waste bins for, you know, like basically for compost. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with them or what you think of what they're doing.
Everyone is trying to become more aware and educated about recycling. And a lot of it has to do because there are federal regulations about these goals of what we are trying to meet. And if, in a few years, if you don't meet them, there'll be monetary fines about not meeting those. So these trash haulers, and it happened in Los Angeles as well, they all bid to have zones. So we no longer have commercial, we have NASA here at this temple, because NASA promised to have one of these material recovery facilities and to sort it out. And commercial was nowhere near that sophistication. So everyone is trying to gear up to meet what the federal guidelines are and to bid to get these contracts for these zones. So Santa Monica is probably the most progressive in Southern California as compared to maybe San Francisco, which is, you know, a lot more sophisticated. But and the attempt to have these separate little buckets for recycling of your food waste is really the direction to be moving in. But as if Maciek was still here, he's the one that is within the same zone as here, the NASA. He has called them, they have no clear ideas of what goes in them. And really, they have these buckets, but where is it going? So it's not clear exactly what it is. They're getting in these phases, and the phases are kind of going ahead of what they're capable of doing at this time. So trying to be aware that you need to do that and ask them that question. If you collect in your house in the winter, you may not get any smell. But if you're in the summer and you don't have aircon on, then it could be a different story. And they haven't come to that issue yet. So the option that we have now at the compost center in rural Tokyo is people collect all week, add bokashi to make the no rotting smell. And then when they can, because they still don't have any dirt or they don't want to bury, they'll bring it to the compost. So it's a little bit of duplication of efforts, but if you are wanting to save and can have access to disposing of the right of way, it is a good alternative. We have Nancy here, who she has another alternative of what to do with your waste if you're beginning to collect it. You can
Put it in the freezer. So I freeze my food waste and even like flowers. I chop it up, put it in a bag and I put it in my freezer. And then on Fridays, when they're at the bin, I take all that food waste and everything
She takes
and dump it.
ice water.
Because I'm in a really little space in Little Tokyo and I don't have really room to do the bokashi and I'm not a bokashi person. But I will.
Which is
go to
okay.
The compost bin.
Freeze your.
Yeah. Brilliant idea.
Especially if your use is not that much, your waste is them too.
Well, and then, when Amy first started this, I was bringing my food waste, but I read something that old tea bags were really good to put in your food waste because it collects the moisture. And it was summertime and she didn't have a hose or water yet. So it's like the frozen food waste with the tea bags that were frozen were really good for the compost bin. And that was how that frozen thing sort of started.
She became a frozen expert.
May I have a question? Frida, did you have a question?
Go ahead.
Another question about water, because you mentioned the oil tea balls and how we save the water. As you know, we're in a drought and a huge crisis right now. And LA Times had an article a few weeks ago about how, despite being in drought, everyone knowing about it, clearly we're doing worse in terms of saving water. So I wonder if you had thoughts about Mottainai around water and what you do in your house. And maybe we can chime in, others.
Oh,
So tell me.
I don't know if you could say we actively are saving water, but we have become less conscientious about gardening and watering our garden. So I already had drought tolerant plants in, so if you want to let them go the route, so be it. So, so that's good. In terms of water in the house, I have tried different methods about trying to recycle your washing machine water. Gray water. But the method of the soap that you use that allows for gray water has not been as effective as cleaning my clothes. So I'm kind of a little bit challenged about that, but that seems to be, besides that and your shower, and cutting down on showers are probably the main sources. We did have a leak in our toilet, so that is another big drain. Any of that kind should immediately be taken care of. And it could be remedied where the washing machine is a little trickier. In Japan, I saw a pump that you put into your furo, into your bathroom, your bathtub, and you use that in your washer. So, kind of another method of using again. Or you can use a bucket. If you had a furo though, or you better, yeah, I don't have a lot of deep on that, but do you have any methods about water saving?
In my house, we would take baths Japanese style. So you would shower first and then be in the furo where it's clean. I mean, where it's you and all of the whole family, which just like in Japan. Then I hooked up a gray water system where that water is still basically clean and would go out to a trough outside the garden. So all the garden would be water.
That's how you grew up?
No, that's just in my 10 years ago.
Oh. There you go.
So the Japanese, I think, have a wonderful, I think it's great that you're in touch with Japan because they have so many of these ideas like for Bokashi.
Bokashi, the city, the cameo about Bokashi. It seems like that would be a really easy, not easy, but at least a plan.
It takes a lot of different kind of promptings to move all of us in one direction or not. The big prompting in which produced new people can come, at least because people caution, is because of the new regulation that went in this year and why. Well, some people are getting issued their organic waste because the FB 1383, which then it really doesn't apply to the individual user, but the trash haulers are becoming aware that they have to get everyone more accustomed to that, because the first cut is looking at the big food waste, which is occurring like in markets and large restaurants, and maybe places like a hospital where they have big productions going on all the time. That they are in called the first tier and are making accountabilities required this year. For residential use, it maybe won't come until maybe another 3 years, but it's a bucket.
Well, that's another thing I've noticed when I look at the bucket on the other trash cans, people don't know how to use them.
I wish Maciek was here because he has been in continuous conversation about, well, how come one brochure of mine says this and the other doesn't say the same thing? Because it's just too much information that is not coordinated, and I really question where it's going. Because as you all know now, even if you have a blue bin, because a blue bin, there's no place that wants to take it anymore at a reasonable price. Blue bins are going into the landfill. So, you know, we have the sorters there, but the whole system is not really set up or working yet.
Right. Well, in Glendale, in our zone, they're collecting the food waste, but they ask the people to put it in plastic bags. Which is, the talk about sustainability, that is.
Yeah, and then where do you put the plastic bag? In the green?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But how, I mean, who's gonna sort out the plastic bags?
Yeah.
What's gonna happen with bags full of rotting food? You know, I mean, that really seems so poorly thought out that I'd rather put Bokashi in between than, you know,
Which would seem like,
illogical,
yeah,
or at least
Yeah.
more sustainable than adding plastic bags. It doesn't make sense.
yeah. So you can all see that it's starting on it. So whatever an individual can just research and make some choices about yourself. And the whole idea of composting or bokashi or freezing or whatever you do, the main goal is it's not going to the landfill. And you really want to put the carbon, you really want to put all that back into the dirt.
Right.
Like for myself, I'm not a great grower, but you still want that organic waste back in the ground. That's where you want it. So just keep that in mind. Yeah.
I'm so glad. I feel like the Japanese families, they feel less guilty. That's how I feel because you taught me how to use Bokashi.
Another good student. Okay.
Can I bring up one last question? And I think this is relevant for Zenshuji, for example, and that is death, recycling and death. We've had a conversation about this. I've been reading in the paper about different ways mushrooms are these kind of vests that they put on corpses because burning is really bad for the environment.
It is. Well, because of just any kind of burning, but fillings, any other kind of things that cause them the burning is just toxic. So there's a lot of reasons why they're not saying to cremate. That really the way to go is to wear a mushroom suit. There are now options of bokashi. That's in my will. Yeah, so we're no different than all the rest of the animals and the food here, that we should all be part of the cycle.
But so much of it involves changing our, because when you mentioned the death, the mushroom soup or whatever, it's everyone laughs because it seems really wrong in a way. Right. And so we have to change our attitudes, our mind about what we think is.
We are part of the organic world. We are part of the organic world. So mushroom soup, well,
Well, Amy would, I thought she was joking at first, but she said she wants to be Bokashi.
oh yeah.
And she's there.
Yeah.
So maybe you can say a little bit more about that too, because. No, no, please not.
Oh, yeah, I guess I should put that in my will. No, is my husband still on? No, there's an art.
But this is the extent of your commitment to the
I don't know if
sustainability.
I'm a commitment, but it's a realization. It's a realization that we are all organic. And where do we belong? Do we belong in a crib? I'm not against someone who has a crib, but it is the same as a landfill. In that you are never meant to be recycled. You will just be inert in the ground. Which if that's your idea, so be it. But if you're thinking about advocating for recycling of your food waste, then this we be food waste. I mean, you know, really. It's the same idea. And we're here on this planet. And what function do we have in the recycling of that? It's all connected.
And I'm wondering, to bring in Kojima Sensei, is there a Buddhist teaching around what to do with the body after it's dead?
Oh, dear.
Oh,
I mean,
you give me 1 hour to talk, or just one word. One word is just do.
Yeah, not watch, but do. Well, it's a personal decision for everyone, but if you are along that path of logic, then it's not too big of a next step about what to do. On that note.
any last questions from the chat or from the audience?
There is no question from the chat, just appreciation to Amy.
Well, I want to say hi to everybody and thank you for all that are on Zoom and those that I can see. It's so good to see Loretta, and I think Eric is in a picture frame. Oh, there's Gina Zenaerobics there, and
Yes, please show yourselves, and so Amy can see you.
there's Kathy, who's really been to all the.
Oh, Eric Newton, Rikuma Sensei, Kathy,
That is.
Tracy Nakada.
Yeah, and there's all the Zenaerobics people. So happy to see you all. And John, if John's still there, John's from Seattle. And Diane and Georgine.
People want to see the Mr. Honjo.
See yourself. Show yourself, Reed.
Well, you know what? I don't know where he is. I can't speak for
He's
him.
doing his Bokashi.
My kodomo, my offspring, is very happy and probably relieved that I didn't show their photo.
Oh, they ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, husband.
There's something.
This is a rare sighting.
Okay.
Thanks for zooming. You know what? That was enough.
Yes.
Oh, and then Kojima.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Then I will say just goodbye.
Oh, you say goodbye? Okay, so here. So thank you all for spending time with me here. I hope it was enjoyable. It was definitely a good exercise for me to put everything together and to see the connections and appreciation for being here at Zenshuji as well as in the community here. And I hope we can continue to connect, particularly with Bokashi, you know, both here and with those on Zoom. So I'd like to continue with that, but thank you all for coming today. And this is enough. Thank you.